So next we have a panel session. So this time we're going alphabetically by first name. So we're starting off at Alison.
Behind you.
Behind me. Daniela. Second, Rashmi and Sharron. Okay, so as everyone knows, Alma Digital is kind of becoming robust functionality now. So having a panel session, which I think we've entitled, can't remember what we've entitled it.
Alma-D.
Alma-D. All you want to know about Alma-D. Okay, so we have Alison from UNSW. She's worked there for 12 years as an electronic resources manager. She's also worked as support, training and implementation with a number of vendors, including EBSCO, IME and GIAC. Daniela is a senior metadata librarian at UniSA in the Research Outputs Repository Service and concentrating her efforts on metadata quality control and metadata administration of the repository. Managed a number of library migrations, and the most recent one being the migration of data from digital to Alma, and at that stage we use the electronic portfolios functionality, and now currently finalising the migration of portfolios to digital collections in Alma Digital. Rashmi has worked in various coordinator roles at the University of Western Australia within collection and access services, and prior to that she was a music librarian. In her current role, she oversees document delivery and interlibrary loans, course materials online, the discovery layer branded as OneSearch, as well as the library service desk. And then we have Sharron, who's the Systems and Metadata Services Coordinator at the University of South Australia. She's worked at the uni for nearly 30 years. Is that right? Wow, okay. During which time she's finished her qualifications, Associate Diploma, Bachelor of Arts, and most recently a Master of Information Technology. This year she's been setting up Alma digital collections and workflows and transferring files from portfolios to digital collections with a particular focus on archival materials and end-to-end digital theses, a project that meets her aspirations for developing new workflows and testing new functionality while streaming workflows. So would you please welcome our panel? Thank you.
All right, well, we're probably not as organised as the Leganto group, where we all talked about, they all talked to each other and you got a very similar picture. So each of us, I think, sort of went off on our own tangents. So the tangent I decided to do was to give you a quick history of what UNSW did with Alma-D, and also some of the issues that we found along the way, which will hopefully save you having to find the same things when you come to use it. So one of the things to remember is Alma-D is more than just Alma-D or Alma Digital. It's also Alma-C, which is Alma Collection. And of course, remember, it was off on the list where everyone talked about Alma-D, Alma-C, and then finally someone was brave enough to say, what does it all mean? So Alma-C is Alma Collection. So just to give you a history, we started with Alma-D in February 2016. To be honest, we'd been hanging out for this for ages because it was going to replace our digital product. It was one of the final separate products that we had to replace after moving to Alma. And what was our digital providing? It was providing the digitisation for our course readings, exam papers, annual reports. The ACUP reports are just, we get the PDF files, and so we want to make them available. And then all of that other stray stuff where no one knew where to put it or how to provide it. So we had to look at something that was going to replace this. So what have we done with Alma-D? To a certain extent, I think we've done it all. Some have worked nicely, some have been a slight difference. So we first started by creating our Alma digital records for our exam papers, and we did this manually. And it was a really great way for our staff to actually understand how to create an Alma digital record. It was a lot of work to a certain extent, and it was slightly tedious, but everyone really did understand how the whole Alma digital records worked. We then, because session 1 was starting, and this was the whole bit where we had hoped it had started earlier, but it didn't. We had Leganto starting in February 2016. We're hanging out for Alma Digital. And so what we did is we loaded all of our digital readings into Alma Digital, but linked back to the digital link. And what we then continued to do for a wee while was actually still create the record in Alma Digital to then import into Alma-D. We then started to create the new readings requests that we had for anything in this session 1 as an Alma Digital record, and we actually saved the file through Alma Digital for those. We then had to convert all of the links that we had for our previous digital records to load the files into the Alma Digital record. That was a bit of a bummer. That's where it had been nice if Alma Digital had been a little earlier and we could have done it as one hit, but we had to do it as 2. Again, it wasn't that bad in that it gave staff experience on how to use Alma-D. Because one of the things is you learn how to use it and then you never do it again and you forget how to use it. So this really meant everyone had to do it in quite an intensive part. Then we started to use the import profile part of Alma Digital. So we take a CSV file, we convert it into a mark XML, and then we import it into Alma. And we've now done that with quite a lot of collections, and it is a wonderful way of doing it. And we use Mark Edit to create our mark XML. So Mark Edit is a wonderful tool when it comes to do this. We also had something where we had a research centre who was closing at the end of 2016. They wanted all of their research data to become available to the public, and the library put their hand up and said, give it to us, we'll try Alma Digital to see if we could do that. And finally, we did things like importing in Canberra's exam papers, and we also imported in the records from Aquila. So you can do that. Again, created an CSV file, use Mark Edit, and then import it in. And it imports in with all the attachments. And it's almost ready to go. There's nothing else that you need to do. So just some points to note. So this is the bit where hopefully this is something that you guys can take away and don't have to worry about moving forward. Now, I must admit, I thought I'd be able to point to the screen, but I'm not that tall. So one of the first things with Alma collection names is that the default display picks up the 245 of your bib record and also the Alma collection record. So when we first went in for our collection, we had something that displayed cipher. And we sort of said to ourselves, but that's not what we want. What are we going to do? The reason we didn't know what was happening is the documentation is not wonderful. It's not necessarily expanded much since then, but it was just trial and error when it came to using that. So we then worked out that if we had a different thing for the 245 and a different thing for the actual collection name, then we would not get that odd display. And the order in which it displays is... It's the bib record first and then the collection name second. So that's how we resolved the issue. We had different names. What we then did is actually changed our Primo display so that it only picked up the bib record. So it just depends on how you've done your setup. With collection discovery, so that's the new functionality that they have with collection. So on your Primo record, you've got collection discovery. What you see being displayed is your Alma collection name. And it's the little bit that I've kind of highlighted here. That's your collection name there. That's what displays in your discovery. The other thing we worked out was you have to be very careful what you suppress and what you don't suppress. If you don't want people to see your collections, then you need to suppress your collection name. Otherwise, it will go out and start showing to people. So if you suppress the top collection, then none of the sub-collections are seen as well. If you unsuppress your top collection, you can choose which sub-collections you want to display by using your suppression. It's pretty normal, but it wasn't something that we expected to have happen, and so suddenly things were displaying where we're going, oh, we didn't want that, so we had to use suppression. So within Alma-D itself, we created a naming convention and we also used enhance the record rules to really reduce the amount of data entry that we have. And understanding where all of the information goes really saves you a lot of effort as you move down the track. So on the top screen, what you're doing is you're seeing a Alma representation record. So I've got the title. You can see the title is then going to become the $245A. It's then also going to be what you see when you open up the Alma digital reader. So knowing which piece of information is going to appear where will help you along. And as I said, naming conventions for us was really important so that people didn't accidentally put things in different places. One of the things that is a slight problem is the date field. So you have the date field in the representation and it will appear in the $260C. It only appears once, but it appears twice when you come to do it into your digitisation or the actual viewer. The label that you use for your annual digital record is what you actually see in the View It tab. So I've got label there, what I see in the View It tab, and then I've just got a little bit there of what you see in the View It. So again, we really thought about what we were going to put there for people. Did it make sense? Was it going to reduce the amount of data entry we had? So for all our exam papers, we used the label exam papers, just to save on the amount of data entry we had to do, but we also thought it would make sense to people. The other thing to think about is your file name. So when you come to attach your file, what you see here in the file name here, in your attaching the file, is what you see when you go into the Alma digital viewer. So if you're loading, say, a PDF record which just has numbers and that's the label that you use, it won't make much sense to your users. The other thing to think about is what is the name of your actual file attachment. Again, if you just give it a name or numbers, when the people come to download it, they won't know what it is. So with our exam papers, we actually made the effort to say that it was this course code for this year in this session when it came to the file name. So you can help people by thinking about how you're going to create your records. The other thing that is we've used a lot is access rights. So this is the first time that we really got into the whole access right part of it. And these are all the access rights that we have now. Now, the access rights will determine, will a person be able to download the item if they're off campus and not a UNSW user? Some we do, some we don't. Do you want to put some sort of restriction on it? Some we do, some we don't. The thing with access rights is you can also set up messages. This is the message that we use for our course readings when the people can see the bib record, but at the moment we don't want them to see the attachment because it might be breaching copyright or something like that. So you can actually put in that string and that's what appears against everything. And you can globally update access rights for collections. And it really does help quite a bit with hopefully providing people with information. I mean, what we all say is you can put the information there for people to see, but whether or not they read it is something else. So what sort of improvements would we like to see with the Alma collection records? It is not the nicest display of a collection, and I'll show it briefly. It really needs to browse the records a bit more. What happens is you go to the Alma collection, you go down 3 layers, and then you're thrown into Primo and you see all your records there. It's not quite what we expected. We thought there'd be more like a browse functionality, but there isn't. One of the other things is that if you update either the collection name in your collection name or the 245, it doesn't update the other. So one of the things is if we update one, we'd like the other updated at the same time. Display really does need to be improved. And one of the other things is that when you come to attach your representation to a collection, you can type in your collection, but but you have no idea, is it the top collection or is it a sub-collection? And so you actually really have to understand how you've structured your collections. Alma won't help you. You'd have to go out, look at it and see there. In the actual Alma digital record is the copyright notice. When we first started, the copyright notice did not appear as soon as you went into the reader. You had to go off and click the copyright button. Our copyright office said, nah, you're not allowed to do that, you've got to see it straight away. So what we did is we actually attached a copyright notice to all of our representations so that it was the very first thing that people saw. They've just changed that now, just upgraded it in May, so if you're about to implement it, lucky you, you won't have to worry about that. You should be able to determine how things display yourself when it comes to your files. There is an option where you can sort it, but it's a very arbitrary sorting. It doesn't work totally, to the extent that for us to file the records in the way that we wanted, we had to use Roman numerals as a way of having a unique display. Yeah, there was no other way of doing this, and Roman numerals was the only way that we could do it. There really, really does need to be an Alma digital subject area in analytics. They keep talking about it coming. It hasn't. It really causes a problem in that we don't know what our Alma digital records are. And I can do the usage, I can do leganto and things like that, but I don't know what I've structured with my records. And that's one of the most important things that needs to happen. There needs to be bulk updating and removal functionality with Alma Digital. As I said, we attach that copyright statement to all of our digital records. We want them to go now. We have to go in and manually do it. There's no other way of doing it, which is a bit of a bummer. There needs to be more copyright statements than what Ex Libris allows you. For some reason, they think there's only 3. You only have 3 copyright statements that you're allowed. That determines your access rights. You can have many access rights with the 3 copyright statements, but there needs to be more. And there needs to be, again, the manual sorting of files. So I'll just show you quickly just what I was saying. Is there a thing? You can always pop in and have a look. So this is our collection that we created for Cypher. And this is one of the problems that happens. It doesn't like IE. It's better in Chrome and things like that. And it also doesn't like the old display. So I don't even know that I'm going to be able to do it now. Let's go down. Yeah, there it is there. So you click into the collection. You then have to view collection. You then get more information. I'm sorry about the display part of it. If you go into Chrome, it looks better. And then you have to then click into view items. And then you're taken to your Primo records. So this was the bit where I was saying with the display, it needs to be slightly better. So I've got some other examples, but I'll hand it over.
Good morning. This presentation is going to be very short, hopefully. It's the result of our latest work where we were moving from Alma-E to Alma-D. So I'll explain what Alma-E is now in our view. I'll talk about our setting at the University of South Australia for the repository of research publications, which originally we used Digital, and then we migrated to Alma using Alma electronic portfolios, hence Alma-E. And now we are moving to Alma-D because we were aiming for Alma-D from the beginning, but it wasn't available at the time when we installed Alma. I'll tell you what benefits we already see from Alma-D, where we are with our migration, and what we've learned so far, and a bit of a wish list of Alma-D enhancements. So, as I said, we migrated in 2015 from Digitool to Alma. We are not happy with Digitool for a long time, so the moment when we had Alma, we were looking for something to replace it, and the closest to our needs was to move into Alma. So Jenny Quilliam actually had a lot to do with this vision, and we think it's great. It took us to today with no problems. So what we basically did, we migrated all the files from Digitool into Alma electronic portfolios. So the portfolios, as you know, they have a link, and the link was depending on what kind of or what type of version of the publication we are looking at. Access rights were the most important issue for us, because our copyright is very strong at UniSA, and we actually manage the whole collection around access rights. And we created collections where we assign the access right at the collection level. And depending on the type of the publication, if it was a publisher, we had two collections, an open access publisher collection and a restricted publisher collection. And then we had the published versions, which were actually downloaded from the publisher website and archived on our sites. Again, two collections, open access and restricted. We had postprints, two collections, open access and restricted, and we had a very small collection of preprints. Electronic portfolios were built through these URLs. So one URL was going to the publisher, and usually, if we can, we use the DOI. If not, the publisher website. Otherwise, we are using local URLs that were pointing to where the file was located. And again, there are different URLs for open access and restricted. What the current status is, we actually build only one collection for the files that we store. And that's because the access rights in Alma-D can be assigned at the file level. The embargoes, which were a big issue in the electronic portfolios, is a bit simpler, even though it can be improved. So in electronic portfolios, we are actually putting all the embargoed files in the open access collection with an inactive status and an activation date according to the embargo date. Then we are going monthly and looking at the embargo dates, and if they were expired already, we are activating them on a particular day. And that was actually quite a convoluted work. I have still some details if anyone is interested in using this kind of idea. Now we can actually associate the access right with each file, so that's really good. We store everything but the links to the publisher publications in one collection, as I said. And each digital title, which is basically coming from the MMS ID from the BIP, can have multiple representations, and we use the multiple representations for various versions of the publication. So it could be published or postprint or preprint. These would be representations. And then inside each representation, you can have multiple files. We don't use that very much, but this is for cases where you have annexes A and annexes B and annexes C for the published version, for instance. So That's a good way of assigning access rights. The only portfolios that will maintain will be at publisher portfolios because these are DOIs or website URLs, and we'll continue using that. The rest of the collections with electronic portfolios will be inactivated, and yeah, we'll use just one collection, which is the research outputs repository now. Benefits that we noticed already. The processing is much faster and easier. You can actually drag and drop files straight into the digital representation that you are interested in. We reduced the number of collections from 7 electronic collections to just 2 electronic collections at publisher and 1 digital collection. The access rights can be associated with individual files, so we don't have to worry about that too much. And embargoes are independent access right entities, which is a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that you can assign embargoes for whatever date you are interested in. You can assign it by publication year, for instance, but we cannot use that because we are very strict with our embargoes in terms of dates. So sometimes we have 6 months, sometimes we have 18 months. So year after year doesn't actually cover that. So we decided we'll use the fixed date. And because for each fixed date you have to set a separate embargo, we assigned 4 quarterly embargoes per year. So we have 4 embargoes for 2017 and 4 for 2018. We went to 2020. And basically, as you assign an open access right or restricted access right, you can assign a particular date with an embargo. It is supposed to be deactivated automatically. We haven't seen that working yet. So the first embargo that we have set up for 2017 is 1st of July. So after 1st of July, we'll see how it works. If it doesn't yet, so we'll have to do something because we'll have some records that will have to be made open. But so far, yeah, we are just hoping that the functionality will be there. Another good thing that we've discovered is that you can actually group the files by MMS ID. And that means that all the files are attached to the same title, various versions of the publication, which is great, because originally with the electronic portfolios, we had the postprints in one collection and published in another collection, and they were all over the place. So now we have everything under one heading, which is the group ID, which is the MMS ID, basically. We migrated about 35,000 portfolios from electronic to digital representations. And we had to set up the embargoes for 4 per year, as I told you before. One thing that was very useful was using the sandbox to test all the functionality of Alma-D, because we discovered things that we didn't expect there would be there, but they were. So, for instance, it doesn't recognize duplicates. So if you have bulk uploading and you bulk upload twice 3,000 records, you will have double the representation, and then you cannot delete them because it cannot identify the duplicates, and you cannot actually say, I want these deleted. So because I was in Sandbox, we could actually delete the whole collection. That's something that you can do. And you withdraw actually all the representations and start from scratch. But if that was happening in production probably wouldn't have been such a good idea. If also you are using the bulk upload and you are missing files, digital files that are listed in your CSV file, it will still add an empty title to the collection. So that's not a good idea either, because you will have titles more than representations, basically, and you can count they are in, but they are not because the file was missing. And we had some instances with missing files, which, again, because it was sandbox, we were aware of them, and then we looked, and we managed to have the CSV file just with the right files that we were loading at the time. The import profile can be, you can either create multiple import profile for each type of access right, for instance. So you can put all the representations that are restricted once and open access again, and or you can just change the same profile every time when you load according to the file that you are loading. So that's what we've done. So we use just one. It's very easy to set up. You can use either CSV files or XML files. We decided to go for CSV files because more people were familiar with CSV, so that was all right. We used the MMSID to group files also, so and that worked very well. So we had a load of post prints, for instance, and they were open access, let's say. So we loaded them with a group ID according to the MMSID that they came from the title. And then for the published version, we did the same thing and put the same MMSID and same group ID, and they went fine. So all of a sudden, we had two digital representations under the same title. Also something really useful, S3 browser. So that's for digital loading in bulk. When you have more than 1,000 files. So in the documentation, Ex Libris tells us that digital uploader can be used to up to 1,000 files, which is correct. Because we had such a big number of files, we wanted to work faster. So what we've done was using the S3 browser to go to the location where these files were uploaded. You have to actually load the CSV files through the digital uploader so that it creates an import number, an ingest number, which is the name of the folder where all the other files should be loaded. And you then load them through S3 browser, just going to the directory where you have them and put them there, and start submitting the load, and it worked fine. The wish list, as it is currently, it's mainly because we are very new, so there might be things here that can be done, but we couldn't find these duplicate representations. So, yeah, two of these wishes relate to identifying, selecting duplications, create alerts if you have duplications, and also deal with them in bulk rather than one by one, because, yeah, that's a bit of a nuisance, having to delete each file individually or each representation. Another thing that we noticed was that you can create sets, all titles, which have the MMSID as identifier. And you can create digital title sets or digital file sets that have a different identifier, but you cannot actually combine the sets. So if you are looking at all the titles that have digital representations, for instance, you couldn't identify them because if you have a set of digital titles, that doesn't include the MMS ID. So you are just looking at digital titles and that's it. It would be good if we could have the MMS ID listed in the digital title sets, in the digital file sets, because we are always connecting them, and this is missing for the time being. Also, it would be useful to have a way of identifying digital representations that have no files attached. So sometimes if the file is missing, it adds the digital representation, but it doesn't have it's an empty file. So what we've done recently is just looking for file of size 0 and trying to identify them like that, but it would be nice to have a set or something more substantial. Sorry.
Oh, that's me.
I have to agree with Alison that it would be great if we would have in analytics something about digital titles, digital collections, digital files. Yeah, that's probably the first thing that is required, and I guess it's going to come soon. But we fully agree with that. Thank you.
Hello. I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing at UWA with Alma-D. Our journey is almost identical to what Alison has already talked about, so I'm not going to go over it again and rehash the same stuff. I'll just try to pull out some of the unique things. So we got access to the Alma Cloud repository in May 2016. So what it actually is it's Alma uses an Amazon S3 cloud storage, and you get access to the Amazon storage appropriate to the region that you're in. So there is an APAC cloud storage. So anyone who gets access to that cloud storage as part of their Alma subscription, where actually all of our files are sort of like in separate compartments within that same Amazon storage. We get 1 terabyte of storage with our subscription, and then you can actually get additional storage at a fee. It does have versioning capability, so if you need to request for a version to be retrieved, you can do so within 90 days. So we use Pure for our institutional repositories. That's totally separate. We were using DigiTool, again, like everybody else, we were using it for our digital objects for our electronic reserve, our course materials online, and our exam papers. So again, we really wanted to consolidate the number of systems that we were using, and we had a daily sync job between DigiTool and Alma that we wanted to get rid of. So when we took up Alma, we migrated all of our metadata for our digital objects from our previous system, Hive, into Alma. So we already had the metadata there for our digital objects, and we had duplicate metadata. We had duplicate metadata in DigiTool and in Alma. And then whenever we needed to create a new object, we would have to create duplicate metadata. So then what we did when we took up the cloud storage is we used the third-party tools that have just been talked about. So that's the Alma Digital Uploader and the S3 browser. So we didn't use that one. But there are third-party tools which allow you to interact directly with that Amazon storage, because Alma doesn't actually... when you're in Alma, you can't actually see what's in your storage in the cloud. You can just see the workflows in Alma. So if you actually want to work with the storage itself, you need to use a third-party tool. So our IT department were able to develop a script which, bulk uploaded all of the PDFs, and then once we had the URLs in our representation records, they were able to develop a script which did a bulk deletion of all of our previous URLs that were pointing to digital. So that was a very seamless process for us. So then we started using it to create new objects, and some of the things that we're finding is we're just finding it really easy to use. The actual process of creating a record and uploading the file is so straightforward. I think partly why the training documentation is maybe not so detailed is because the actual nuts and bolts of it are quite simple. Obviously, we always want to know more, and we always want to be able to do more with it. So we haven't really started bulk uploading PDFs, but we are doing the same thing of creating the records in a CSV file and using MarcEdit and uploading those records into Alma. So what's next for us is we've just developed a long-term digitisation strategy, and we've decided to use Alma Cloud to as a storage point for digitising our special collections, and also potentially for non-HDR theses. So it's not a preservation system, so it's not a substitute for something like Rosetta. So we still haven't quite worked out what we're going to do about the preservation aspect of it, but we are going to start using it to further digitise our unique collections. Some of the interesting things about the access rights, which have already been touched on, is that they're very powerful, actually. There's quite a lot there. For instance, we have some native title tapes or oral histories and that sort of thing, which we're not allowed to make accessible. But if someone was to obtain access from the copyright owner, we could actually customise the access rights based on their unique user ID or their IP range. So, you can have things that you've digitised and only make them accessible on request to one particular user. I think that's quite a good development there. So the other thing that I just wanted to talk about was the digital workflows. So we are using digital workflows in Alma for things that we are attaching for our clients. So, we're using it predominantly for items that we want to scan from our print collections and make accessible electronically, and that we're using for document delivery or patron digitisation requests through Primo. So we're using the digital workflows to pass the requests on to the relevant library location, they scan it, it detaches and it sends it out to the user. We're doing that. But we haven't started using the digital workflows to create digital inventory. And the reason is because I don't think it's actually fully fledged. I don't think it's all there in the system the way it really should be. And I'd really like to talk to more about this to Ex Libris to find out how they see this working. So if you want to request something from a print journal or a print book and have it scanned at that relevant location and attached, you have to request it from the original item. You have to attach the digitisation request to the original item. But then you don't want to attach the representation necessarily to that original item. So you can't do it all as part of the digital workflows. You need to create a separate MARC record for that extract or for that journal article, but then you can't actually attach a digitisation request to that record because it's not attached to an item. So I can't really work out how you're actually supposed to use the digital workflows to create unique inventory in Alma. So that's something I really like to spend a bit more time on this year, trying to work out whether that's possible, because otherwise, you're in this situation where you're emailing staff in other libraries and saying scan this and put it on your local server and then attaching the PDFs, where it seems like the functionality to do that is there within Alma, it's just not quite meeting our needs. So I think that was pretty much most of the things I wanted to say. Just in terms of the copyright as well, agree that there's not enough robustness in the copyright declarations that are available. We would really like to see the ability to create Creative Commons declarations for a lot of the work, but there's just not that flexibility in the system to do so. As mentioned, there's only 3 copyright declarations that are there, so we're going to have to start putting Creative Commons information into a public note field or something like that. It would be really good if we could have a copyright declaration for different types of Creative Commons licenses. What else? Yeah, so going forward, we want to explore more of what's available in the collection discovery via Primo, and we now have to go down that route of deciding on the practical matters of actually digitising our special collections. So, the hardware that we need and all of that sort of stuff, and develop the standards to make those collections accessible. But the actual processes involved with using Alma to do that are very straightforward, and we're really happy that we've made that move.
So our final speaker is Sharron, who's going to talk about Alma Digital and e-theses.
Okay, Alma-D turned up for a while, but we didn't want to use it straight away. It wasn't ready. Pre this year, our theses came to us predominantly in print. That was mandatory format, and the students would send us a digital copy of their theses if they wanted a digital copy available. Most of the time they sent it to us and then asked where it was when their actual print theses hadn't been approved yet. So we had to hold on to those. So our workflow was a graduate research service would send us boxes of theses every 3 to 6 months period. When we got those, then we could actually process the electronic as well. At the end of 2016, the university changed its policies and we no longer accept the print. It's mandatory to get the digital, and that seemed to us a good time to actually move into Alma-D for the processing. Part of that required changes to our workflows, because getting the digital was quite a different flow. Instead of getting them every 3 to 6 months, we were now expected to get them monthly. Instead of cataloguing the print and then duplicating it, making it suitable for electronic, we were now doing it direct from the electronic. Bits that we didn't expect, which required a change of software, was that no one was checking the theses before they came to us. They were marked and sent through. So we had a couple that we put up that we had to take down very quickly because they had data in it such as the author and the supervisor's signatures, home address, name, and of course it came up as an issue for privacy and identity theft, so we then had to get our software so we could redact the information out of them. One of the other parts that we had to change over was the author consent forms. When we were getting the print as the predominant and the digital as the side, we used to put them in as portfolios, and portfolios allow licenses. So we were putting the author consent form in as a licence so people could see what the permissions were, was there an embargo, anything like that. Moving to Alma-D, you can't use a licence. It requires a portfolio, so we had to rethink our workflow in that manner. We also had to create almost two workflows in that when the university decided that it was taking the digital-only thesis was July last year, but they didn't send us any of these files until they worked out how to use Dropbox, get the files to us. So we got 6 months' worth of files with everyone asking for their stuff to be available instantly, just like we all get. So our first workflow, we used the standard add digitisation record form with the quick record part at the top. So what we found was when you add it as a new, each of those sections in there that you fill out, what your record format, whether it's Dublin Core or it's marked bibliographic, when you select one of those it becomes sticky, so you don't have to keep entering it. Your collection you could put in, as Alison said, your title, creator, description, date. It did annoy us that the date kept going in the 260. Some of our staff tried to get creative and we were putting most of the bibliographic details, like the number of pages and what the degree was and everything in the description to copy and paste out of later, and we kept saying, no, don't do that one. The usage type, you get a choice of derivative of master, and we decided for theses that we were going to use derivative, predominantly because we are redacting a lot of the information of the signatures and the addresses out of the theses when we find them. So we kept that as derivative, and you select your library, go into, those bits are sticky, the access rights change every time. So our staff started filling in the top of the form, then they get to the bottom half of the form. One of the things that caught us out to begin with is at the top of the second part of the form it says remote, and you actually have to think of it from Alma's point of view, not our point of view. We think it's remote storage because it's not on our site, where Alma says it's remote storage if it's on your site. So you have to make sure that button's unticked, because as far as Alma is concerned, it's not remote storage. I made the classic mistake when I started doing this of not putting a label in, not knowing that failing to put a label in meant there was no link in the catalogue record when it displayed. That was a bit of fun, and there is no bulk way of adding labels. So that was something to test people when you're not ready for it. It was really easy once you filled out the form. You opened up Explorer, found your file, dragged it into the file upload area. You could see it load right there and then. And you then got the option to save and edit or cancel. We picked save and edit every time because we wanted to add a second representation. So every record that gets attached is a representation where you can add multiple files in the same representation, if that makes sense. So the top part of the screen, and I'm sorry if it's small and hard to read, that's two representations added onto the one record. What we started doing was adding the author consent form as a second representation. And I'll let you know here, our catalogue, we're not using Primo directly, we're using the API to get the data out and put it into our own views. So each authority or access right has its own code, which is a set of numbers like this. And trying to find that in the API was getting a bit difficult. So to make it easier on our staff, we purposely put things that we don't want to display, such as the author consent form, in a non-public digital collections library because it shows up as a name and it's very easy to pick. And we gave it the usage type master, and they were the 2 points that whenever we could actually program our catalogue that if those 2 bits of data in there, it didn't display, which worked well. From that section at the top, you can add a representation or delete. And this is why we were using the save and edit, because whenever we entered the data, we would save and edit and we get that top section. We could then click add representation and you get the screen towards the bottom of the screen, and that's where we could add the author consent form, or we could add extra files if we wanted. So it was nice and quick to do it in one hit. Then we got to a stage where we caught up with the backlog and we were now getting our files come in monthly. And again, every person had told people about it and wanted to link to their theses, so we had to get them done quickly. So we changed our workflow again in that we now catalogue the thesis directly into a template, and then we add our digital file as an existing. So in this form, this is the same as the first one, but the only difference was instead of new, we've clicked existing, and the options that appear shrink down. So that top half of the form now just says collection and title. You search for your title, you select it. Once that's done, it asks you for the collection to put it in, and then you fill in the bottom part of the form as normal, drag your file across, and it's loaded. We found that was the best way to do it now, because we've got the time to actually catalogue each record and get the file up. But when we had the 6 months worth of files, it was just a matter of getting all those files in as quick as possible, so the quick record worked a lot better. Staff have been very happy with this thing. They've told us it's less click intensive than working with portfolios. Quick and easy is the other one that comes up a lot. Our cataloguers like it because our library officers can set up the majority of the record, add the file for them, and they can actually open the file within their browser and catalogue it right there and then without having to go in and out of Explorer to look for the files. We had our first thesis that come through that was multiple files for the same thesis. It was performance art. We found that we could put them all on the one file very quickly with the drag and drop rather than having to go in and create individual titles. We had the same issue with the display as what Alison did, but we spoke to the person who was doing our catalogue, and we actually stuck... I can't remember I think we did it on the file name level. We stuck a number at the front in the order that we wanted them displayed, and they sorted it on that for us. The other feedback we get quite regularly is that fixing errors is so much quicker than what they had before. If you got your portfolio wrong, in a lot of cases you had to delete it. With this one, if you've got the wrong image on, you delete the image, you reload, but all the rest of the information is there. You need to change your access rights, you pull down the drop-down arrow, you pick the new access right, it's done. You've accidentally put it in the Do Not Display library rather than the Open library, you pull down the drop box and do it. It's just there, it's so much quicker. I haven't put up slides for the other bit, but I'll just add to what some of the others have talked about. We also did our archive collection and put that across to digital. One of the issues I did find was using the sub-collections. There seems to be a maximum number before it starts to display the sub-collection outside of the top collection. And when you look at it, it is actually part of the top collection, but it displays as if it's a standalone, which can be quite interesting. And we had a little bit of issue when we were bulk loading with sub-collections, in that you have to, when you use the loader form, if you haven't done this before, you can only have one collection loaded at a time. So you can't do a file that belongs to a top collection and say this one belongs to sub-collection 1, this one belongs to sub-collection 3, this one's 4. It just doesn't work that way. You have to go in and redo them all at the same time. But overall, moving to Alma Digital has made it quicker for us to process, a lot easier for us to deal with. We just had to get around the issue of we had work shifted onto us from graduate research services that we didn't have before, in that they would have checked the theses when they were print because they could flick through them. Coming to us in digital, they didn't want to open every file to check it, so now it's our responsibility to take out any data that's inappropriate.
Thank you. Quick. Thank you. The timing's very good. So, any questions for any of our panel? Amelia.
I've actually got two questions. The first question is, are you all working with mark records, or have any of you been panel in double core for your digital collections?
Mark.
Mark for all of us.
Hate to say it, it's great control.
Someone who's been working with double core. And the other question is, how have you been finding upload times, especially for large files?
Very quick.
Really quick.
So speedy.
Large files, in terms of the file itself, or large number of files, like bulk loading, because that's a bit time consuming. So, yeah.
No, they're quick.
Probably a question for Sharron, but it's mostly about digital theses. So do you give them, what perpetual link do you give to the student, like a permalink or you're minting DOIs or handles?
We're minting a DOI for them. And handles, sorry. Yes.